Melvin Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Student Loan Scheme Exemptions and Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Bill amends the Student Loan Scheme Act of 1992 by extending interest-free loans to borrowers who are present in Niue, the Cook Islands, Tokelau or the Ross Dependency for 183 or more consecutive days in order to encourage borrowers from those countries or from that territory to return to their country and contribute to its development. And also students who are enrolled with a New Zealand education provider and engaged in full-time study overseas under either a formal exchange program approved by the New Zealand Government or a formal agreement between a New Zealand tertiary provider and an overseas tertiary provider. The bill also makes 8 minor or technical amendments to the Student Loan Scheme Act of 1992. As has been mentioned numerous times, this is a largely technical bill, but that doesn't diminish its significance for those whom it affects. These are the students who have taken up interest-free student loans in order to support their decision to better themselves personally and professionally. It's a big call to go and study. It takes time, money and opportunity cost. Make no bones about it, the decision to study is the right decision for many young and old New Zealanders, and New Zealand benefits through an educated, highly skilled workforce. This is why I say that the interest-free student loan program is one of the most progressive pieces of economic development legislation passed in this House, because it helps drive New Zealand's economic development. An educated workforce is imperative in this day and age, as we will never compete, nor do we want to, with low-wage economies. This is why I'm astounded the National Government is making noises to cut the scheme. How will the 75% of people earning under $40,000 a year be able to afford to send their children to university and polytech when they can barely afford to pay the power bills? They can't, and this is why access to funds to further oneself is so important. In fact, it's vital. Education needs to be accessible to all Kiwis who wish to use it. So why did the Prime Minister say recently that he was going to take a careful look at the policy settings around student support? Why did Louise Upston in her second reading speech spend a few minutes telling us about how expensive the student loan scheme is for New Zealand taxpayers? Society bears this cost in the knowledge that the benefits are for the country, to our communities, far outweigh those costs. Why did Amy Adams stand up and talk about tax debt regarding student loans? I'll tell the House why. Because the National are priming the public for interest-free student loan removal. Stephen Joyce has told the Weekend Press newspaper that the student loans policy is in his sights. The government's intention is clearly to make it harder for tertiary students to get a loan in the first place to cover their fees. If the government is going to start picking winners in the tertiary education system before they enrol, then people who have not done well at school for a variety of reasons and who want a second chance at learning should beware. I have a friend who's a doctor, and she said that when Labor introduced the interest-free student loan legislation, it removed a weight from around her neck as she was struggling to even pay the interest, and was beginning to conclude that a move offshore was the only way to kill off the debt. She is now in Wellington Hospital and sees light at the end of the tunnel. So back to the Prime Minister's comments about taking a careful look at the policy settings around student support. What does he mean? They'll make access to student loans and allowances harder. They'll make tertiary education opportunities in universities and polytechs available for the few, not the many, I suspect, Mr. Speaker. Once again, legislating for the few at the expense of the many is simply not fair, and takes away the aspiration that Labor works to foster in our communities. The Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, referred to students who don't take their studies seriously or who don't get a job quickly after qualifying. Who will determine who those students are? Especially when you have students who go into university or into polytechs and they find that the first course of study that they take isn't exactly what they decided or isn't exactly what they want. And they only can find that out through going to university first of all. And as I said earlier on in the day, my brother was one of those who took business studies initially when he went to Waikato University, only to find it wasn't right for him. He then went on to get a BA in Māori. Then, after that, decided that law was what he was after. And now he's a very successful lawyer up north. Will student support stop after a graduate degree and prevent people from choosing postgraduate study? What about students who need more support to succeed because they have started further back from the starting line than others? And I refer here to many Māori students who I've seen go through schools that I've been involved with, who take time, who don't succeed to the same extent initially as many other students, but they do have the ability to go on to university, but they're just starting a little bit back, especially financially, because most of the people that I know, family and friends from up north, they're not that financially well off, and so it's a lot harder for them to make the decision to head off to university knowing that this is going to be a big strain on their family and their finances. But a number of people, also, a number of family and friends do go off to university and they get there and they actually do really well in the first year, but they find that the financial struggle for their families is too much to bear, and they many tend to drop out. And this is supported by the research of the StarPath project based in the University of Auckland. So we all know students who work at their studies and at part-time paid work, often for low wages, and struggle to make ends meet. Setting up criteria for discontinuing student loans or allowances is dangerous in elitist territory. Again, it's more of the same for the few at the expense of the many. John Key is threatening students who put up with a low income now so they can study and contribute to the country's well-being in the future. Right now, he looks like he's going to punish them for doing that. But first, he'll hit them with a higher rate of GST, just to make things even harder. What if there aren't jobs to go into? What about the redundant workers who are wanting to enrol in courses to improve their skills and need allowances and loans to do that? What about students with disabilities who find it difficult to get employment and so continue to study to improve their quality of life? Over 45,000 Kiwi 15 to 19-year-olds are now unemployed. That is over 12,000 more than for the same period a year ago. That number increases to over 72,000 Kiwis once you include those aged 20 to 24. The danger now is that many of these young people will stay jobless for a long period of time as the national government takes away the opportunity to aspire. There's also the veiled threat of lifting the cap on fees institutions can charge, contained in Mr. Key's reference to quote, an inflexible and bureaucratic funding and policy framework, unquote. This looks like tertiary education will soon be the sole domain of the rich, but New Zealand's crying need is for the upskilling of the many, not the few. If Mr. Key wants a step change in the New Zealand economy, where does he think it is going to come from if not from post-compulsory education and training? He should be nurturing and investing in it, not threatening it. The fact is that National, in their short time in office, has already proven they are no supporter of students. Here are just two examples. The Institutes of Technology and Polytechnics of New Zealand revealed that about 6,000 aspiring students could be turned away from polytechnics as a result of the government's refusal to waive financial penalties if they exceeded enrolment caps. This is another short-sighted decision by the government which clearly prefers to see people stuck on the dole rather than engaged in study and training required ensure we emerge from the recession with a work-ready and productive workforce. Secondly, the government passed a bill which reduced the number of seats on Polytech councils from a maximum of 20 to just 8. The bill allows the Minister to appoint half the council positions. Requirements that Māori, staff, students and the community must have a rep on Polytech councils have been cut. This will enable the government to take a much more dominant role in, disappointingly, will remove existing provisions for almost all student, community and
I'm sorry,
academic
the
staff
member's time has
representatives
expired.